Last year's Moto Z and Z Force were the first smartphones to get modularity right, but they also had pretty distinct personalities. The Ultra Slim Z was a hell of an engineering feat that demanded your attention, and the chunky G Force with its shatterproof screen and big battery seemed purpose-built for getting things done. This year, Motorola has one new flagship, the Z2 Force, to replace both of last year's models. It's both slim and durable, and most importantly, a pleasure to use, but Motorola definitely didn't nail everything. Let's start with the hardware. The Z2 Force basically looks just like the Z2 Play, which itself is a mild tweak of the original Z design. It's made of tough 7000 series aluminum that has been brushed to give it a more rugged look, and really, Motorola could not avoid the physical similarities to last year's Z since it had to make sure all of the existing Moto mods still worked here, and they do, by the way. We're left with a remarkably slim device, which some people might have trouble gripping because there's so little material here. That was never a problem for me. I suspect more people will be miffed by the lack of a classic headphone jack or the wimpy waterproofing. The Z2 Force has been treated with a nano coating to protect it from splashes, but that's about it. At least you can expand the 64GB of internal storage with a microSD card. Like last year, the Z2 Force uses a 5.5-inch Quad HD AMOLED display, and it gets the job done. Colors are nice and punchy, but the screen looks slightly yellow compared to devices like the iPhone 7 Plus and HTC's U11. Both of these phone screens are also slightly brighter than the Z2 Force's, but it was still pretty easy to read outdoors. The most important thing about this screen is that it's almost unbreakable thanks to Motorola's Shatter Shield. It's a little different from last year's version though. This time there's a softer plastic shield on top that protects the AMOLED panel that's prone to picking up scratches. In fact, it's soft enough that raking a fingernail across the screen is enough to leave what seems like a permanent groove. It's annoying, but at least it's just a cosmetic problem. I spent the past week throwing this thing around like an idiot, and the screen still works just as well as it always did. Then there's the software, which will feel familiar to anyone who's used a Moto phone in the past few years. Motorola mostly leaves Android untouched, instead adding Moto experiences, like the karate chop gesture to fire up the camera, and the ability to ditch the on-screen navigation buttons in favor of swipes across the fingerprint sensor. That second thing really isn't my thing, but it works well enough. Moto Voice, though, has been updated to act a little more like a virtual assistant. Being able to say, "show me my next meeting," or "show me the weather" is definitely handy, but other than that, Moto Voice is kind of pointless. Sure, you can tell it to show me Spotify, but tapping the icon is almost always faster, and anyway, Google Assistant frankly does all of this better. I guess Motorola's heart was in the right place, but man, this feels like a miss. With the Z2 Force, Motorola finally embraced the dual camera craze, pairing a 12-megapixel color sensor with a 12-megapixel black and white one. As with most of Motorola's cameras, this thing falls into good, not great territory. Colors and clarity are decent, but phones like the S8 and the U11 definitely outpace this one. The inclusion of that second camera also means Motorola was able to build a depth effect mode that sort of simulates the background blurring bokeh that you'd see on a high-end camera. It works, but it really struggles in anything less than perfect lighting. Really, the best part about the Z2 Force's camera is being able to shoot in true black and white. It's more fun than you'd think, and shots actually look pretty great. Thankfully, the Z2 Force is a speedy little machine. You probably saw that coming though. Like plenty of other flagships we've seen this year, the Z2 Force uses a Snapdragon 835, 4GB of RAM, and the Adreno 540 GPU. It's a proven, powerful partnership. That horsepower combined with Motorola's light touch on the software front means this Moto is effortlessly fast. And now we come to the part where I eat a little crow. I was totally expecting battery life to suck, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I anticipated. Motorola says that it'll last a full day, and that's generally what I saw. The Z2 Force lasted just north of 12 hours in our video rundown test, and between 14 and 15 hours a day of mixed use over my week of testing. Now, that's definitely not great compared to phones like the S8 Plus and the OnePlus 5, but it's not awful. Still, for Motorola to essentially ignore the best thing about the first Z Force when building its successor is puzzling at best and disrespectful to loyalists at worst. I get that the company wants to sell more mods, but it clearly saw the need for a phone with a big battery before. Why the change of heart? Despite some questionable decisions, the Moto Z2 Force is still an impressive device. It's the most powerful modular phone out there, and, scratches aside, that screen is still crazy tough. If you dig the idea of a phone that theoretically gets better with time, or if you're a Butterfingers of the highest order, the Z2 Force seems like a no-brainer. Everyone else, though, should take a good look at the competition to see if Motorola's compromises are worth living with.